All right, let's call to order the this December 18th meeting of the Rockport School Committee. This is being broadcast, the audio and video. So just so everyone knows, for the record, let's go around and introduce ourselves.
June Sanfilippo, Business Manager.
Mark Lorenz, School Committee Member.
Nicole Altieri, School Committee Vice Chair.
Kathy Riley, School Committee Chair.
Mark Branco, Superintendent.
Amy Oakes, School Committee Member.
Jessica DeLisi, School Committee Member.
Morgan Brady, Student Representative.
Awesome. Okay, and the minutes from December 4th meeting were in the drive. If everybody's had a chance to review them, any changes? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Second.
Okay. All in all in agreement?
Aye.
Aye, me too. Okay. Sometimes the words after a long day get stuck in your head. Okay. Do we have any public comment tonight? Okay, that's great. Do we have any correspondence?
We do not.
Do we have any donations?
We do. That. Thank you to all of those people for their philanthropic endeavors and support.
Great. Any personnel?
No.
Okay. And now is the
We're up.
portion of the where we want to hear about your successes.
All right, so I'll start by talking about just the school in general this last week. So the winter sports season has opened up. I'm pretty sure there's good turnout to the basketball games. I have not actually gone, but my brother went yesterday and he had a blast. The drama program just announced they're going to have auditions for Drama Fest the week we come back from holiday break, and we're also having a fundraiser tomorrow night. It's going to be a movie night in the auditorium, so if anyone feels like coming. But for Student Advisory Committee specifically, at our last meeting, we put together a survey that we're going to send out to the students during an assembly when we get back from break, so that there's a designated time for everyone to fill it out. And we also set up a meeting with the school librarians to talk about the practices in the library and what can be changed and improved. We have sat down with a few of our classmates and talked about what the student body wants. So we're getting a consensus, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I do have to leave early, but I wanted to say I hope everyone has a good holiday break, and I'll see you in the new year.
Thank you, Morgan. Okay, and in the drive, it looked like we had a couple of subcommittee updates.
So the policy subcommittee met and we finished our review of section I on instruction. So that was a very large section we made it through. So next time we'll put together the all the updates and get that out to a first read at some point coming up in our, I'm not sure it'll be the next meeting, but sometime coming up in January or so. And then we have one more section after that to review. So I believe it's J, right, on students. And so we're getting there. We definitely are planning on being done this year. But it's been a lot. There's been some good discussions and some really important updates, I think.
Thank you both for doing that. That's amazing. It's going to be done this year. That's awesome.
That's all we have for updates.
Oh, that's all
Yep, yep.
communication.
Yep.
Okay, great.
So we do have a a trip that we would like to take a look at for your approval. Which was queued up, but let me grab it again for you. So our varsity hockey team would like to take an outing. Boston College is playing UNH, so big D1 hockey. They would like to go up to the campus at UNH. And so this slide deck that you have had in your drive just kind of takes you through some of the logistics. They'll leave here at 4 o'clock. They'll get up to the rink. They'll return by around 9:30 or so. It is being fully financed by Viking Hockey Program boosters. That covers the cost of the tickets, the bus, the dinner, and everything that goes around with that. And so they're really looking to talk about team bonding and morale. They're going to talk about skill development. We talk about this with our musicians and theater kids all the time. To see professionals kind of in the act of doing their work is almost no better way to see what the high level looks like. So to get our kids, kind of off the island, so to speak, and out to see some big D1 hockey players is really, really kind of a cool opportunity. So I'd like to thank the coaching staff for that opportunity. Thank Viking Hockey Program boosters for being able to support this. And they have been doing this for a few years, so they've traveled out to Northeastern University for a game. They've gone out to Boston College. And apparently this last bullet made me laugh. The players were adamant about watching another Boston College game, and they got a better group discount by going up to New Hampshire. So they're being fiscally conservative as well, so I'd like to applaud them for that. So we just need a motion tonight to recommend or approve the trip as presented.
Okay.
Can I just, quick question?
Mhm.
I looked through, but I didn't notice, was there anything about the number of chaperones?
I believe it's the entire coaching staff, so I think there's 4?
What?
3 or 4 at least, yeah.
3.
Yeah, there's at least 3 or
Right,
4.
so as long as it falls within our
Oh, yeah.
our guidelines for
Yep.
the chaperones.
Yep,
Yeah.
definitely does.
Do we have a motion to approve this trip as presented? A second?
Seconded.
Thank you. All agreed?
Aye.
Aye. All right, yay.
So also in your drive, you have the North Shore Education Consortium's annual report. They send this out every year and recommend that we share it with our school committee, just so that you can see the format, the structure, sometimes with new members. I think it's a really cool way to kind of learn about the consortium, the value that Massachusetts provides by having the collaborative model is unbelievable. And we really, it allows us to service Rockport Public School children in a variety of ways that we can when we can't meet their needs in district, and when we really would like them to stay as regionally close as possible. And it really provides a broad base of opportunities for our kids. So some of the nice features that you step through is, it's a good tutorial. It does show you all the member districts. There is a structure between a member district and a non-member district, so that you do sort of get your bang for your buck by becoming a member district. I represent you, so I serve on their board of directors. And so I'm, one vote of however many districts we have. And I also serve on the finance committee this year for the collaborative. So the good news is I tend to get a little information ahead of time, which is kind of nice. So any questions, thoughts about it? I just wanted you to take a quick look at it. But each of the schools within the consortium are really kind of spelled out and highlighted in here. And so I think it's a really nice opportunity if you're not familiar with the model to really check it out. And in my short period of time working with them, it's a fantastic group of professionals who are dedicated to supporting all the kids in our area. I think right now that's about all I can say on it.
I just had a quick question.
Yeah.
How much have we in the past taken advantage of? I was reading about like the regional job alike groups. That seemed pretty
Yeah.
interesting. I was like, oh, and that's not something I guess we wouldn't know. if
So
we didn't take
historically,
advantage
I
of
don't know
that.
what that's looked like. I do know that we are talking about taking advantage of that now within our special ed department. I'm not going to call anybody up to talk about it right now, but I do know that that's something we talk about. They also offer professional development.
Yeah, that was the other
So
thing
we've
I
also
was-
talked about leveraging professional development, and as you know, we're trying to work through them to really streamline special education transportation right now. And I think we're really close as a group to getting that done, and we might even see that come to fruition for September, which would be a huge win, particularly for small school districts who have to put certain children on, on a alternate transportation for quite a distance. But I think the job alike is a good one. I do think the professional development is a great place we can leverage. And I do know that Fran and her staff are literally just a phone call or a visit away. And I know she was on our campus a couple of times last year. She's already worked with Anne-Marie pretty closely to just try to help us understand what we can and can't do in the district and to look at partnerships. And making sure that our most needy kids feel like they're part of our community to the best of our ability. And that's kind of what the consortium offers you in this model.
That's great. I often forget about, boy, this is really loud today. I often forget about the other schools.
Right.
I often think of like the O'Grady School and everything, but you forget about their vocational and the Recovery High School and everything else, so it's good to see it and be reminded.
So while we stay on the topic of special education, we got a pretty informative presentation from our interim Director of Student Services, Anne-Marie Luster, last meeting. And I've had preliminary conversations with Anne-Marie as well as with the committee to talk about appointing Anne-Marie officially as the Director of Student Services. She's done a remarkable job in a really quick amount of time. The learning curve is steep. I think she's still working on that. It's going to take a little while to fully understand the scope of the job. I think some of us are in year 2 or 3 or 4, and we're still figuring out the scope of our jobs. But really, really proud of the work she's done. The team, she has fit in beautifully with the team. She has some historical relevance. She really is looking at programming in a way that I don't think we've looked at in a long time. And so for me, when we talk about being conservative from a budgetary standpoint, but still developing programs that meet the needs of kids, we've spent a lot of time talking about AP results and some of the other high-achieving parts of the high school, but student services covers a really, really broad range of students, and the charge to meet the needs of all of our learners is really led well by Anne-Marie. You have in your folder some advocacy letters of support from our leadership team members, as well as from Pam Gerard, who many people sitting here might actually know. I think she was in this role many years ago, and she's now the executive director of Lab, and she is serving as Anne-Marie's coach in the state coaching model right now. So I wholeheartedly ask for your support in moving forward with removing the interim tag and entering into contract negotiations for the full position. So I'm open for questions, comments, or just a statement.
Any questions? No? Okay. All right, well then, can I have a motion to accept the superintendent's recommendation to appoint Anne-Marie Luster to the position of Director of Student Services pending successful contract negotiation with the superintendent?
So moved.
Second.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Nobody's excited about that at all.
There's a lot of work to do, so thank you. Next, we'll talk a little bit about RESA contract negotiations. Kathy and Nicole have been part of this for 2 fantastic meetings, so I don't want to say everything. I'm hoping you guys will jump in here. But we are proud to tell you tonight that we have tentative agreements in all areas, with the exception of an appendix related to evaluation documents, and I have worked with them over the past 2 days on draft models, and it looks like within very short amount of time, we're gonna have those done. The plan right now is that we look forward to having that final TA hopefully this week, and then they will move forward to try to ratify the week we come back. That puts us here on the 8th to take a vote after they've ratified. And then process is complete. So I'll turn it over to you guys. I guess all I want to say publicly is how happy I am about the collegiality, the relationships between RESA and the negotiating team. I have not been part of something so collaborative in a long time like that. It was really nice conversations, and that's back to back now with 2 unions, RTA and RESA, where we had fantastic collaborative negotiations without representation in the room, where we could just talk with each other about being members of the Rockport community. I couldn't be proud of that work. I think it's important. I think we need to make sure we all feel valued as employees here. And so thank you for your time, and thank RESA for coming to the table, and thank RTA for the work they did last year. I think to know that we're going to be sitting here very soon with everybody sort of settled professionally and focusing on kids and our own health and well-being as adults is really important.
I think, I don't want to speak for Kathy too, but I think I speak for both of us. We want to thank Mark and the admin team for all the background work that you did to help us as school committee negotiators to have all the background information, all the numbers. And thank you so much for all of that. And I think that we were really pleased, and it was very important to us that the members of RESA knew that we valued them, and that they were really important members of our district and very important members for students. And so I'm really pleased with how it was able to go. So I thank them as well for all the collaborative negotiations.
I'd say it's one of the highlights of being on the school committee so far, and I know I lucked out this year. We were very fortunate walking in with what we could start talking about due to, like Nicole said, all the back end work that was done with finance and the admin team and Mark and everybody.
I didn't mean to forget you.
Well, you know. So there's so much work that goes in before we sit down. I mean, almost it is fed to us to review and ask questions, and it's a fabulous team. And I'll say it over and over again, especially for the record, that Rockport Schools is as great as it is because of the team, all the teams, all the different teams. And, you know, whether you want to go into negotiating units or in subunits, or we can just say all the team is what makes Rockport special. And the fact that we were able to sit down and talk about some hard stuff was great. It was very exciting, and I know I'll probably never have another positive experience like that again in negotiations, but it was awesome. So thank you all, and thank you to the team as well.
We're going to continue with the budget presentation, the budget workshop model. I've included the same preliminary slides, and my plan is to continue that, just because we have new audience members, we have new people watching on camera, just so that there's a historical reference. So I won't go as in-depth maybe as I have in the first meeting, but I just want to make sure for context that we're all seeing everything, that we have a pretty prescriptive and aggressive, admittedly aggressive timeline, with the town meeting requiring us to be in front of them by April 5th, which requires us to do a vote for February 5th, so that we can have time to then meet with Select Board, FinCom, and any of the public constituents that we need to between your vote and the town meeting vote. So this sort of just lays out that process for us. Just a quick reminder, of who the school committee budget represents. You know, we are really here for the students of Rockport. We're here for the children, and you know, they don't have a voting voice, and we do. So we're really here to represent them and put together the best public school opportunity that we can. Just a reminder that we are doing the zero-based budgeting process. So that's a little different than some other types of public budgeting, where we're not taking the current budget and just rolling it forward. We've had made decisions to make sure things that are not existent anymore have been basically excluded and pulled out early. And you'll see evidence of that actually in the new slides tonight, and we'll have good conversations about what that looks like. But I think that's actually, tonight's new slides are sort of a good example of the concept of zero-based budgeting. And then again, for the community and for people who are here for the first time, just a reminder that we have two major components: the operating budget, capital improvement budget. What we're talking about is the operating budget, the appropriate budget from the town. And June and Kirk and myself, along with the leadership team, have put together the capital improvement ask every year, and we are in the middle of that process as well. We will be going, my guess is we'll have a meeting right out of the gate after the holiday break with Town Hall to approve the FY26 capital improvement plan that we had presented to the school committee about a month ago or so. And then the variety of components of the budget: we have the town contribution, we have the school reserve that we talk about a lot, that includes the circuit breaker, special ed transportation, and school choice. We have some level of user fees, And then we remain aggressive with grants. We're small and mighty in this particular area, so I think to be aggressive in grants is really important, and to make sure that we have sound members of our leadership team who are all over this, and who do the work, who do the work of many when there's only a few of them doing it. So I appreciate the efforts around the grant work, because it does help offset, and it also helps us to provide opportunities that maybe we couldn't through the budget. Also, we have the Chapter 70 appropriation, which we talk about a lot, and when we get our representatives in front of us, we can continue to push, as we know that there's something broken at the state level. The funding formula is what it is. We're bound by Prop 2.5 at the local level. We're bound by a Chapter 70 formula that is pretty antiquated and does not equitably take care of the needs of all of the school districts in the Commonwealth. And so as a result, we wind up building budgets the way we're building budgets right now. And so, we'll continue to advocate. My group, MASS, has a very, very robust advocacy group that's very involved at the state level with legislature work and appropriation of bills and development of funding at the state level. So my hope is they will continue to advocate on our behalf, and maybe during my time as an educator, we'll start to see some shift in how the state formulas are set up. We have capital improvements. We have our special education reserve fund, the Medicaid reimbursement, which does go back to the town in our model. And ultimately, we have, an unbelievable core of philanthropic members in this community. I say it every time I can, that I haven't been involved in a school district that has this amount of philanthropy. So a big thank you to those individuals and organizations that help supplement our budget. So our goal remains the same, to just continue to develop a fiscally responsible budget that still supports the growth and achievement of students. I am working hard with the leadership team to make sure that the mission of remaining strong programmatically is important. So while we make very difficult financial decisions year after year, to still put all of our programming at the forefront and to make sure we're providing our kids with a really comprehensive pre-K to 12 education is clearly the goal and important. So this is our first new slide tonight. This is the preliminary overview. This is sort of our 10,000-foot overview. So that many of you are used to seeing this version of this slide at this point in time. So this spells out some of the major drivers by major area, and you'll see where the offsets fall into place down at the bottom. You'll see what that total net looks like. We have a placeholder of a town contribution right now of 2.9%. I've had multiple conversations with the town administrator. We are confident in that number, and I believe that we will have solid conversations with the select board and the finance committee based on the difficult work we're doing already, and how that work married with a 2.9 ask will get us to a place where we can continue to move forward. That leaves us at the second to last line, that last bold, that leaves us with just over $1 million gap in the budget between last year and this year. So we are going to be looking at reducing $1 million. And that's what we'll start to talk about tonight, what that looks like on the page. Not easy to talk about, but important to do it publicly and important to do it early so that we can make adjustments based on committee conversations and internal conversation with the leadership team. So I'll just step you through the notes on the right-hand side. A lot of these district increases are driven by salary adjustments, which is true in any organization. That's the major driver. Strangely, we have a slight decrease in overall expenses, mostly in stuff. We've tried to, order less paper, not over, this sounds trivial, but not over-order office supplies, and any place where we can be careful, we try to. The majority of RES and RMHS increases do include salary adjustments. They include built into this a RESA reserve, so to speak, in anticipation of finalizing a contract, which is what we had done last year with the RTA contract, and then increase in supplies and curricular resources. Some of these are contracted services, so to speak, with curriculum where we have 2, 3, 4, 5-year contracts with money built in. In other cases, we are trying to put together, as Ms. Goodhue put forward already, a much more viable and sustainable curriculum review cycle that will require to increase some funding in those areas as well. Student service decrease, so I just don't want that to be misunderstood. So, for example, the total tuition costs have decreased or are projected to decrease and I'm going to say this as carefully as I can, right? There are students who eventually, by definition, age out of services, and when that happens, the cost of educating those students, reverts back to the district. So at this point in time, we do foresee some level of decrease there, but we also know the reality of raising children. And so, that could turn on a dime. So while we see that now, I'm not sure that remains consistent between now and even town meeting. Transportation costs have decreased a little bit, again, either because less kids needed it suddenly in this rebuild, probably because of the age outs. Ultimately, I think as Anne Marie and I get a better understanding of what the consortium's new model is going to look like, that could really benefit us overall too. If we start to have partnerships with transportation, we'll be basically combining those services with the other districts in the consortium who have decided to kind of come on board with us. So we do think maybe that decrease would hold and potentially be even greater in that particular area. Athletic increases, similar to always, salary adjustments and equipment purchases. Some are consumable, so to speak, and some aren't. They're just equipment that's expensive in certain cases. In our OMR, operations management and repair, those are also salary adjustments, supplies, and minor utility increases, not big projections, believe it or not, this particular year. So let's hope that projection holds. And the transportation increases are in there as well. So this is just some short, quick notes that kind of spell it. So what I'd like to do is sort of pause here, see if people want to talk through some of this slide before we get into managing the $1 million.
For the benefit of folks who have not been in the room or who are watching at home, who might not have been through this year after year after year, I wonder if you would just say a couple words about why, in an environment when salaries might go up 3.75%, just remind us how the percent increase is so much higher than the negotiated adjustments to the contract. I think that is a question that some folks out there might appreciate hearing an answer to.
So when we talk about COLA increases, we have COLA increases that are built into a contract, but then we also have rewards for professional staff built on attainment. So whether that's a master's degree or extra credits beyond a master's degree, or people who go after a CAGS or a doctorate, those are also built into a contract. So when the public sees percentages on contracts, that doesn't always take into consideration the totality of the increase. So so if somebody's out there just using the calculator and adding 3.25 or 4.25 on top of a number from last year, that's not necessarily going to do it. The second big difference is when you have a little ebb and flow in staff, you could have either retirees that go out at a particular salary line and new educators who come in at a different salary line, or you suddenly have educators who are at a particular salary line for a while, and then you have, for lack of a better term, you have sort of a mass movement where a certain age bracket of staff move in a bigger direction based on attainment for secondary degrees.
I really appreciate that, because I suspect that that's one of the questions that might be on people's minds as we go to town meeting. And so I think that the more often we can help people remember, it's not just a percentage. People receive advances for educational advancement and for experience as well. Thanks.
A question about the spreadsheet, just I don't know if it's a formatting thing or if it's if it means something specific, but in the offsets for circuit breaker and school choice, those amounts are in bold. Is that anything specific that we should be aware of?
I had it in bold just to point out, especially for the school committee members, if they were looking back at this year's, it's notable to know that those numbers are going down. In years past, as enrollment went up, statewide, this isn't a Rockport issue, this is a state issue, you were bringing in more money. with the school choice. If you had more, it doesn't mean that there are less children because of our programming. It's less because surrounding communities enrollment is reducing as well. So we're at the same percentage of school choice to residential students. However, those numbers are going down in both categories. So now you have to realize that we cannot have as much in an offset. The offset is going in the opposite direction of what you would want. Circuit breaker is determined by your number of children that have high needs or are out of district, and it's a rather complicated formula with the state and how much they give. As you have, for example, if you had someone with a very expensive program, whether that be out of state or residential or whatnot, you would get a larger percentage because the total cost of that program for that child is so much more above foundation. As that child completes their program, they are no longer there. You're not going to receive those funds anymore. So with the children that we have now, I worked with Cheryl Keating, and we came up with an estimate of what we thought would happen based on this year's enrollment and who would be, and what age of each of these students are. And that number is also going to go down.
And I think what's important contextually, particularly around school choice, is that we remain a school district that people want to come to.
Absolutely.
So we maintain 25% of our enrollment from school choice. It's just that the entire state is having less and less children over time. It's just expensive to have kids, quite honestly. So as the entire state population goes down in 18 and under, that's true about the number, but not the percentage. So I use both numbers for different reasons, right? The reality of less dollars coming in through that particular bucket because it's less children. But at the same time, I'm proud to say that, that many students and families are choosing Rockport. And the phones were still ringing 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, for a lot of reasons. Anybody
And
else?
are those two categories reimbursed or paid? You know what I'm saying?
School choice is, the state is a holder of the funds, so they're transferring, they do not contribute to school choice at all. It's the sending district pays the full amount for that child, whether it's the standard 5,000 or if we offer additional services. There's an extensive formula that's put in for all the services that that child receives above and beyond, and that sending district pays an additional amount. Circuit breaker is state funded. So you are at the, well, not the whim, but the reality of funding of the state revenue of, they have a budget, but if they cannot meet their budget because revenues are not at expectation, they can lower the percentage of what they do give you. So we have budgeted with their standard reimbursement rate, but I do put caution that there have been a couple of years, and one, luckily about 20 years ago, a very severe year where they basically only gave a third of what they said. And you found out mid-year that they just couldn't make their third and fourth quarter payments or whatnot. But that has not happened in quite a while, and it seems that the state is conservative, has some concerns, but they're pretty stable, I would say, overall, on their revenue targets. And they do build conservative budgets that are very generous to the Department of Ed. And so we're pretty confident right now in this number. But then again, it's also, I warn you, everyone, that it is a year out. Yeah.
I don't want to put you all on the spot, but I'm sure you'll know the answer to this. Again, for the benefit of folks who might be seeing this for the first time, when we look at expenses and we look at elementary, middle, and high school, and then we see district expenses, the district expenses are quite a bit higher than any of our school levels. And I'm just wondering, can you give us a couple of examples of what it is that makes that number that big?
always bring my this year's book with me, so I can
It doesn't have to
rattle
be
off.
in great detail. I just think it
Sure.
might be interesting to understand what is the district.
So the district, within the district budget, you're looking at, for example, all of professional development for the whole district, so that's a rather large amount is in that budget line. You would also have any contractual retirement benefits,
Oh, wow.
so, for all
Payouts.
members.
Wow.
So union and non-union members, that's built in. Our support staff longevity program is in this as well. I would say those are the largest ones, as an example. And then within our own area, you're covering all advertising for the district. We also give some general supply money to the schools to buy their initial paper, crayons, pens, and pencil supplies. That comes out of our budget as well. Also, any association dues and memberships for your group is in this number as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Ms. Goodhue, Ms. Rose and I had a really productive meeting a little over a week ago now with our middle school content teachers. So that's ELA, math, science, social studies. And they asked, actually advocated to have a kind of a full workshop style, face-to-face sit-down, knowing, coming out of last year, what the budget looked like, knowing what our declining enrollment reality is, and knowing that the declining enrollment hit the elementary school hard last year, and that as kids age up, it's inevitably going to hit the next level. So I guess publicly, the first thing I want to say is it's not every day that you have staff members who ask to come together in a workshop format in what I would define as an unselfish atmosphere and advocate and work hard for, how we can make a model work moving forward, knowing full well that some of them in that room are either potentially out of a position or shifting positions. So I thanked them that day. I know Ms. Rose has thanked them, and I know Ms. Goodhue's thanked them. It was really remarkable to see people come together. And with the way we kind of presented it is we used this document on the right-hand side as sort of a guide, and it did have guiding questions on it as well. And we just talked about all of us pretending to be consultants, and see what does that look like if you were really a middle school consultant and you really had this knowledge base and this love for middle school concept and kids of this particular age bracket, and you knew the situation the district is, what would your recommendations and hopes be for that school? And through that lens, I thought there were some really powerful, remarkable conversations. The numbers on the left are not new to you. I think we've used them in the past. This is our internal projection, so this is not the NASDAQ number. I wanted for the budgeting purpose, I want to use real numbers because they represent real students. So you'll see in yellow, you can just see the evidence of the declining enrollment finally hitting the middle school. And over on the right, I just pulled it out so it's a little clearer for you. And really that first bullet under the table is what drove our conversations, that the enrollment projections inarguably require us to divide future 6th through 8th grade levels into 2 groups per grade. Right now, they travel through the grades in a 3-group model. And it's going to be important to recognize that we're going to be dividing these numbers into 2. That does not equal 2 teachers necessarily. So I think that's super important to talk about publicly. No decisions have actually been made about what that model looks like. Ms. Rose is going to put a lot of thought into this over the break. I know Ms. Goodhue is too. We've involved Ms. Luster from a special ed standpoint, so we're having lots of conversations based on what came out of this meeting. We're going to take a mini break for the holiday and come back and really reset that first week we can have in January, and try to dig in and theoretically be able to come back to you with a draft model for what we think the middle school will look like from a teaming standpoint. The aggressive hope was we could come to the January 8th meeting with that, because that will give us more time to have real conversations one-on-one with employees in a similar fashion that we did last year. So what makes it an interesting exercise to talk about is that what I also show you here is all of the DESE licenses that actually make someone qualified to teach at the middle school level. So we have 100-ish, 90, 95 to 100 teachers with with DESI licenses, we have to do a full audit of everybody's licenses, because when we put the model in place, we start to look at licensure and seniority, it's going to have a ripple effect. So it's not as clean as saying, well, whatever model we come up with is going to impact 4, 6, 3 middle school teachers. That's actually not true at all. It could impact someone all the way down to first grade, all the way up to 12th grade high school classes, depending on seniority and licensure. So that was not a conversation that we really dove into with the teachers. That's really an admin conversation, but it's important for you and the public to hear that part of it. The conversation we had was, how much do we value having content level teachers who have college degrees in their content areas and who are fully licensed and professional in those areas? And on top of that, how much do we value that being their passion area and their area of interest? Because we think that that's what makes some school districts like Rockport pretty unique. So just because I might have 2 or 3 licenses doesn't necessarily mean that I actually got my degree in all 3 of them. I definitely didn't. Right, so we want to make sure that that's really clear first, and second, that we continue to have, our goal is always to have 100% of our teachers licensed in the area that they're teaching in. So we want to make sure we're striving towards that goal at all times. If I had a child here, that would be important to me. So that was the conversation we had, and to a fault, I think that there was a massive consensus that from the group that if they were looking at us as consultants, it was really important that starting in 6th grade, that we had a content professional with a college degree and with a license in that area. It's MCAS aside, it still feels like a high stakes state, right? We hold ourselves proud as the top performing state in the country, and I think it's important to maintain that quality of educator. So that was the biggest part of the conversation. The other part of the conversation was around leveraging the professional staff and the talents they have in the new 6 through 12 model. So if we're embracing ourselves as a 6 to 12 school, we're all responsible for those kids 6 to 12. Do we have talents, passion areas, licensure abilities, skill sets that will allow us, as we continue to refine the staffing patterns in the district and look at budgetary constraints, can we leverage the skill sets, knowledge, licensures, and interest areas of our teachers in a really creative way to offer all students 6 to 12 as many academic and educational opportunities as possible. So that was sort of the lens of the conversation. And so the hope is we will come to you with some sort of a draft model early in January. And before that model is public, we will make sure that we have had one-on-one conversations with every single employee who's going to be affected by any of this, just like we did last year. And trust that those are confidential conversations until we're live on camera on January 8th. So before I move from this, are there questions or thoughts about the reality of enrollment and the meeting we had with middle school and what our charge is?
These are all the possible
Licenses that would make
Licenses.
someone qualified to teach the middle school, yeah.
I have just one question. As I look at the chart, I realize that what I'm seeing is that the 5th grade enrollment carries straight across to 6th grade in the continuing year. Do we ever, I'm sorry not to know this, is it possible for school choice students to arrive at the beginning of 6th grade? And if that is possible, would that be a strategy that we might be thinking about over the coming years?
So thank you, because I chopped off the bottom guiding questions, and that was actually one of them, so thank you for bringing that up. So the answer is twofold. They can actually enter in any grade level that you have approved. So I will once again come to you once this is all refined and once the budget has passed. The leadership team and I'll have another conversation about class size and about where we think we can leverage school choice, so to speak, and then we'll come back to you for an approval of those seats. So in cases, for example, when you're looking at 53 kids in next year's 8th grade, we're most likely not going to open up school choice in next year's 8th grade because those 53 kids are going to be split in half. That's going to be our largest class size. And it's for 1 year, and then after that, you'll see the class sizes return to a pretty palatable number. So the answer is yes, and we're going to always project up into that 2-cohort model. It actually lightens up when they get to high school because they have so many more elective opportunities. Kids are leveled in classes differently with electives and such. So it actually becomes a middle school. It becomes most difficult at the middle school level.
And then I'll ask the flip side of that question. Thinking back to this past spring, teachers came concerned about class sizes at a specific grade at the elementary school this year. And we actually have a board policy that speaks to preferred or recommended ideal class size. I don't think it's a hard line in the sand, but I'm sure it's familiar to everyone in the room. And so I'll try to preempt some of those questions by asking if you would speak to, in general, what happens when we see numbers that might push us above that? How do you address that?
So last year in the fourth grade, we added a para to try to support each of those classrooms, so we had at least a 2-adult ratio. We can have conversations like that again. We haven't got to that point because we haven't come up with a model yet. So we can be proactive either with deployment of adult resources or with some kind of rotational support. The other conversation that we'll have, as you know, on the policy subcommittee is the MASC recommended policy is across the state. They are telling school committees to no longer have a recommended number in their policy. So what they want to have is a philosophical conversation year over year of what it looks like and doesn't look like, but they don't want to have the hard line in the sand, so to speak, publicly. So we are going to have real conversations with ourselves and with teachers, and then come back to you through the budget process to talk about, what we can and can't do. And I think what's important for the public to know is we can't really change these numbers, right? These numbers are these numbers, and the budget will fall the way the budget falls, respectfully. And so we're going to find ourselves in a position where, there will be some grade levels that are a little higher and some grade levels that are lower. And if you project out over time, you're actually going to see class sizes that are pretty sound and stable over time. So, thank you. Any other thoughts about this slide?
I just had a question. So you said 2 cohorts, not necessarily 2 teachers. Does that mean 2 classes?
It means 2 groups of, for example, in 6th grade, there'll be 2 groups of 6th graders being taught at the same time.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily mean that there'll only be 2 teachers assigned to the 6th grade. Because if we're trying to get content professionals, then there could be, I just don't want to, I'm deliberately not over-explaining it yet, because we haven't had any conversations at the staff level.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at the number.
You're going to
right.
divide those numbers right in half, and that's basically, that's your class
but
size.
that is the class size. Okay, that's what I was.
Yes,
Yeah, because I just,
divide them in half
it's a big
in 8th grade.
thing to think about with that age group and the behaviors that we see and the needs.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I think it depends on who you're asking.
I think it really depends on who you're asking, because I think if we look around this nation, we see class sizes that are much larger than half of those numbers, and that's not good for kids. And I know Rockport has worked very hard for many years to maintain reasonable class sizes. It's good for kids, and it's good for teachers. I think about the difference between the number of classrooms or sections and the number of actual staff members. And of course, that's up to you. That's not up to us. That's what we hire you for. And that's why you have the loneliest job in the district. And we appreciate that you do it.
So right now, the public, thank you.
It's true.
Thank you. So right now, the public answer is, the projection is to divide these numbers in half. And we are conscious of what 53 divided by 2 is, right? So we know what that looks like.
26.
We're not cutting anybody in half.
Don't cut me in half.
We good on this one? Yeah. So we're going to start to get into what it looks like. And these are draft recommendations that the leadership team and I are working on. This could change from meeting to meeting. It is going to remain iterative until literally the February 4th and a half is my guess. So if we hear anything tonight, or if we come up with a better brainstorm than what we've put forward, then I'll come back to you and some of this will shift, but it's important to do it publicly. The top narrative, for those of us watching or listening, is important to understand that there are some real serious drivers every year that cause the gap. One is, again, there's an increase by OSD, which is the Operational Services Division of the Executive Office for Administration and Finance. They're the ones that approve what non-consortium out-of-district special ed programs can charge for tuition. If you remember, 2 years ago, we got hit with a 14%, right? And then plus, maybe over that. And then last year it was, not double digits, but it was not 2 or 3 either. So in a short period of time, I think we were sitting, between 18 to 20%. And we are now, so this looks like nothing, quite honestly, and this is actually a pretty high percentage as well. But it feels like a gift from the state. So we're looking at 3.67 for increase in tuition for any student who goes to an out-of-district non-consortium placement. Similarly, our consortium is asking us to conservatively budget for a 10% increase. As you know from last year's school committee meetings, they did a massive building project. They've been putting money into the buildings. They are also, we've had conversations off before the meeting, so we'll talk about it now, that when they talk about how many students they can and can't take, and we're a member district, but what does it look like when a member district can't get a child in? They have to talk about staffing capacity just like we do. Ours is good or bad, pretty predictable, right, because of enrollment. Theirs is not predictable. It's extremely fluid based on the needs of 20 or 18 sending districts. So when we work with Fran, the executive director, around placing students and their principals around placing students, they're saying to us at the finance level that at least 10% is going to help us fill that gap, maybe hire some more people, maybe continue to take care of the facilities. Many of the students that go to these schools require really specialized equipment, so the equipment is going to be expensive and necessary as well. So that's all sort of baked into that 10%. Also, we know we have negotiated union and non-union salaries with contracts. We have the placeholder for the rest of the contracts. And we have a small increase in the cost of fuel and power. So all of those make up that little over $1 million that we saw on the previous slide. The first three in front of you, this is the zero-based budgeting model. These are cuts that took place after town meeting had approved the budget last year. So we want to make sure that, for lack of a better way to phrase it, we're getting credit for that, so that the public sees that we have been fiscally responsible. Some municipalities and school districts across the Commonwealth would have rolled those numbers forward because they were in the budget, and we don't do business that way. That's the difference with zero-based budgeting, so we make sure if they're not reflected in the current situation, we pull them out ahead of time. But we want to make sure that the public and you will see that these are real cuts. They were real people in real positions with real salaries. So the first one is the assistant principal position from last year. The second one is the special education teacher from the middle school. And then the third one that came after town meeting was the elementary paraprofessional. So you'll see all of those cuts add up to, roughly a little over $200,000 in reductions that we had already done post-town meeting between then and now. The first actual reduction that hits that $1 million is a reduction of the equivalent of 7 full-time equivalent teachers. Reduction can be achieved due to the declining enrollment, will result in staffing reconfigurations primarily at the middle and high school, driven by the new model that I just explained on the previous slide. And as these reductions get more and more refined, then the leadership team we'll have conversations with individuals ahead of time about what that impact looks like, and then we'll come to you with a new model and with some clarity around positions. But that's delicate work, and it does take a lot of time to get through that kind of a reduction. The second reduction proposed is a reduction of 6 curriculum coordinators. These are stipended positions that go to full-time teachers who do a fantastic job leading the curriculum work that Jody and the principals lead. So the current model is on the left-hand side. At the elementary school, we have one person K-2 math science, one person 3-5. Same thing in English social studies. And what we're proposing is that as we have less students and less adults, we consolidate that leadership model. So we will have one person doing K-5 math, one person K-5 English. It's a similar model to what we'll have at the middle school and the high school. So that's a reduction of 6 of those coordinator stipends. Would you like me to go through all of these first or stop on each slide? It's up to you all.
I have a question about this slide.
Yep.
Just looking at the paraprofessional,
Mm-hmm.
is that the paraprofessional that's still currently up on School Spring? And if so, are we hiring for that?
No, and I can't talk too much about which paraprofessional. This is someone who left a position sometime between the end of the sometime between when the budget was passed and this school year. And we most likely looked at some efficiencies in staffing in the district and most likely moved people to fill that position. So no services were impacted.
Well, I didn't mean like impacted services. I was more thinking like, are we still looking for, like, to fill a
We-
role as a paraprofessional even though we reduced one?
So I can't answer
Can't
that.
speak on that?
No,
Okay.
no, not yet. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I can't. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, if we have advertised positions, we have advertised positions based on need, and at the time, this might have been a different type of position.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
The dollar amount is relatively small in the overall.
Where are you looking?
I'm looking at line 3 at the $36,000 and the curriculum coordinator positions. And again, this is outside of our lane. It's your lane and your lane. But I think about the incredible work that we've been hearing about and the power of the people doing that work and the good effect that that work can have for students. And I wonder about what it is like for a staff member to be a curriculum coordinator for both grade 6 and grade 12 in any of these content areas. And I am sure that our staff will speak up and talk about that. But I encourage you and all of you to be mindful that you need curricular support in order to deliver great services to children and teachers. And I just,
Yep.
I think
Yeah.
about the skill of a 6th grade English reading teacher versus the training of somebody teaching AP Lit, and it's just really different.
Yeah, so I guess
So maybe you want to speak more to why it's possible for one educator to
Yeah,
cover that much ground.
I think there's a collaborative nature to the leadership.
That's what I wonder.
Right, so I think the curriculum coordinator serves as a point person. So currently, everybody in these positions are going well above and beyond. As we know, if in public education, stipends, no one is retiring on a stipend.
Right.
Stipends are really a public school's way of thanking you, quite honestly, for picking up the extra work, right? Yes, it's part of your overall salary, but the amount of hours, time, and effort that goes into doing the work for any stipend in any public school district is, if you divide it out, right, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So, number one, this is a group of people that are committed to their content areas and to moving this work forward. What we have seen is really collaborative work on these teams. So what we do know is that when this model takes place, we're going to have collaboration. So it won't matter if the content leader in social studies happens to be a 7th grade teacher, a 12th grade teacher, a 6th grade teacher. They're going to be collaboratively leading process, and Jody and the principals are going to have processes in place and structures in place. And so because the principals and Jody are leading in that manner, they meet regularly every other week, right? There are curriculum leadership meetings right now in place with the principals and Jody, and then they go out and lead their content areas. So
So-
there's a through line there.
So somebody who teaches AP could effectively collaborate and run this process with somebody who teaches 6th grade and vice versa? Thank you.
Yep. And, you know, I know you know what I'm about to say, but when we talk about the size of the dollar numbers, when you're trying to get to $1 million, you're trying to get to $1 million. And so the leadership team and I did not go into education to look for financial efficiencies, I assure you of that. None of us started doing what we did and fell in love with teaching or our subject area going, wow, I can't wait to be financially conservative and fiscally conscious. That, you know, was never a goal of mine, quite honestly, when I studied education and started playing my drums. Yet here I am. So, you know, we have to do the work, and we will be back at it tomorrow morning, and we will continue to wrestle over every dollar to try to figure out which makes the most sense and which puts us in a position where the district to be a destination district for a long period of time. And the other thing I would be remiss if I didn't mention, because we talked about the collaborative nature of the middle school teachers, is that I believe content leaders had content meetings with Jody and the principals, and this was discussed in those meetings. Talked about the model, talked about what the impact of the budget would be, talked about what the work would or wouldn't look like in this model. So before we came to you, all of those meetings were held and with the curriculum leaders. So I think that's an important thing to note as well. So there's a reduction at the top of this in 5 paraprofessionals. This is going to be, it can be achieved in a variety of ways. One is by enhancing special education programs in more effective and efficient manners. What I want to say publicly, as quickly as I can say it, is that no student services are going to be negatively impacted. We are never going to put the district in a position where we're looking to make fiscally conservative decisions at the expense of the needs of a child. With that said, part of Anne Marie's charge is to help us as a leadership team identify where we have inefficiencies in staff deployment, in service delivery, in how we're designing the delivery and the need for it. And so all of that work put together, we believe there's a reduction of the equivalent of 5 paraprofessionals somewhere across the district. We're not discussing publicly where that happens, nor are we 100% solidified in that yet, because as you heard, we're going to be partnering up with somebody to come in and do a full audit of the special ed department. And I suspect we're all hoping that we're going to get some good direction from that audit, as well as continued refinement from the leadership team over the needs of our special ed department. So right now, that is a real placeholder and a real, we believe, attainable. But if it's not attainable, or if something changes in the student needs anytime between now and the end of next school year, quite honestly, then that changes. That's why I want you to know I wasn't just dancing around your question. That's why it's difficult to answer a question like that, because the cut presented in the budget, it actually happening was real, and it is not rolled over, and it is part of the zero-based budgeting process. With that said, we may also have a different need now.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not always sure if I'm hearing myself clearly. The last one is a reduction in 1 full-time administrator. Again, not fully publicly identified and baked in the decision-making process yet, but we believe that we need to find a way to be as efficient as possible everywhere, and we would be remiss if we at least weren't looking within. Mm-hmm. So we're going to look within and think that we can identify one position or the equivalent of one position, depends how it rolls out. All of the reductions together are just over $1 million, as you see at the bottom of this. But the first 3 don't close the gap, because the first 3 happen after the budget roll. So we're at $876,866, leaving us with just under $200,000 still to close. And while this process feels fast and tight, we actually have a good amount of time between now and February 5th to decide if we as a leadership team and we as a school committee understand and in agreement with the proposals here, once they become more public and understood. And secondly, we can have some more refining of the numbers to decide are there other places to look. That $200,000 is not like you can just find $200,000, but there are areas in a budget where we can start to tighten up, whether that's more supplies and materials or being more creative in transportation areas or wherever else we look. So maybe the fuel, maybe the projections around fuel and heat and hot water and everything come in differently in 6 months after the winter. You never know. So this is where we are now. We have more work to do tomorrow to talk about what we presented tonight and to talk about the $187,000 and what that looks like. So I will take a breath and then open it up for questions and discussion.
Well, I was just going to make a comment,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
this is a huge amount of work. And after what has had to be done, or the heavy lifting that's been done over the last few years, it's sort of like when you look at your own household budget, and you did such a great job last year cleaning up all those subscriptions and that you don't use anymore, and you've cut back on the cable bill, and then you got to do it again next year. And the team has been very creative and flexible, and this is not a fun discussion at all. But I think what just about everybody can be in agreement to see that our, the number of students that we have, it looks like, and we'll look into this more, we can make these cuts because we don't have as many students as we had when we brought in these positions. And that's sort of what we're looking at, that's sort of what our job is, to look to see what this actually looks like to the student body. But I appreciate all the hard work that has gone into this. It's amazing. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
I agree, and the only other thing I would say is that we recognize that this is a hard time of year to do this work. We're tired because it's the end of the semester, and we've been working really hard since the first day of school, and we're headed into a holiday, and it should be a joyous time, but this work creates anxiety for the people who sit in the room and do the work, and it creates anxiety for people on the staff who would desperately like to know what's going to happen, but really simply have to wait. And there's an enormous amount of transparency in the way this is done, which is really great. And yet that also can add to people's anxiety. You don't wish this were done in a room with the door closed. It's good to know, but it is just before big holidays and for everyone, for all of you, for you and your team, and for administrators who do this work, and for teachers who are waiting to hear what is going to happen. I think we just really appreciate the work, and we're sensitive to how hard it is for everyone. Yeah, thank you all.
Ironically, I love the way that Mark does this too, because you sat down with the educators, you sat down with the leadership team. You guys have been working on this, brainstorming, and then it comes to us. So we're not the first to know, we're not the last to know, but I mean, we're not, everybody knows before us, which is great, that it's such a collaborative process, and I appreciate that too.
I just think, before we move off of the topic, I think what's also important just to keep talking about publicly is the charge that the school committee and I have, and by default the leadership team has, to continuously find ways to evolve, and to remain a high-performing school district, and to remain our own school district, right? I believe that that's why I was hired. I believe that was the charge from the school committee. I don't think that charge has changed. And so I think if that is our intent, then difficult decisions will continue to be made. And I trust in the staff that we have at all levels that we will continue to be there for the needs of kids and families. And people will be proud to work in the Rockport Public Schools and should be proud to send their kids here.
Here.
Can I ask a question about the offsets, kind of back to that first slide you started with? You know, we talked about the school choice and circuit breaker and whatnot. Another category in there is the grants, which is comparing that grant amount to that 187 gap that you still have. I'm just curious, are those grants that you know you have for sure for next year, that you are committed to
Not
Rockport?
always.
Or is that an estimate, or are they
You
still?
want to define the
up to-
grants, and then I'll talk about the gap fill.
It's a high confidence number in that the trend over the past, 5-6 years has been approximate, that's a good safe number. Sometimes we get a little more, sometimes we get a little less. That number is predominantly a federal number. State grants are less and less and more competitive, where that number is reflective of our confidence in our entitlement grants. Yeah, it's trending down again, and
But
without
that's a
being-
fairly
it's-
confident number.
yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
yes.
with that said, I think the other thing that's important is we need to and will remain aggressive when it comes to competitive grants. So as you know, Project Lead the Way is a good example, right? That's not hitting the appropriated budget as hard as it could have. And that's just one example of many. So we'll, when we build this budget and when Jody keeps coming back with presentations with the principals around how we're moving the district forward, you're going to see evidence of how that grant money is rolled out in different ways. What we can't do is we can't look at $187,000 and go, geez, I think we're going to close it with grants. Like, we just can't do it that way. Whatever we get, supplements, sometimes could supplant if we're allowed to use those grants very carefully for things like salaries in certain departments, but in some cases, they're prescriptive. They're very specific, yeah. And so we're better off to use it as a placeholder number to build it, but not to count on it for closing that
A
gap.
lot of your state grants that are competitive, they're enhancement grants. So you're not gonna be able to fix your budget with enhancement grants. You're allowed to buy additional things or have a new program, partially or fully funded. So it's not gonna close the gap at all with the rules of some of these competitive grants.
And the only other thing I think I would like to address tonight would be the reality that we can't continue to make $1 million cuts every year. Like, that's not actually sustainable, right? So we have the reserve account for a lot of reasons, and we have said publicly that our job is to maintain that reserves at the highest level for as long as possible. But eventually, there's going to be a line of demarcation where you can't really make the same amount of dollar cuts year after year. We're going to hit that much sooner than later. And then that's when you start to tap into the reserves for either 1 year or two, more likely one. And then we have a different conversation with the town about sustainability. So I think what's important to understand is that every time we can reduce this $1 million, in the ways that we're doing it, we are basically avoiding getting into that reserve. Last year, we did hit the reserves a little bit to close the gap. If we come back after sharpening our pencils for 2 or 3 more meetings through January 8th and January 18th, and can't get that 187 any more down than 100 or 85 or something, then we'll have a conversation here about the reality of using a little bit of the reserves to close it, because eventually, I just don't want to go too much deeper when it comes to personnel at this point in time. Does that make sense? Okay. That's all I have on budget.
Okay.
So it's up for you guys for discussion, and then we do have a need for executive session eventually.
Okay. Do we have a need for any other school committee discussion?
I just have like a comment. As someone who grew up in this town and now a parent of some young kids in this town, I really see like what a magical place this is to grow up in. And I appreciate the work being done to be able to maintain and sustain the district, and I'm really excited to be a part of it. I just think going through the holiday season and seeing all the things we do, it's all for the children. I mean, the horse-drawn carriage rides, the caroling in town square, it's just a magical place. I mean, we live in a Hallmark movie. And if we don't, make sure that we keep the school system, sustainable, Rockport won't be Rockport. So I appreciate the work being done, and thank you for that.
I think if we're going to practice and model gratitude, and I think it's good to do that, I would say how grateful I am for the team that worked with Ressa to come to such a quick and apparently successful conclusion to contract negotiations. It's so important that that gets done, and that it's done well, and that people feel valued in the process. So to all of them and to all of you, I'm grateful. Thank you.
No pressure. Thank you. Well, we do have a need for executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, as an open meeting might have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the school committee. We will adjourn from the executive session, will not reconvene in open session. This requires a roll call vote. Riley, yes?
Lorenz, yes?
Altieri, yes.
Oaks, yes.
Delisi, yes.
Great, all right, we're adjourned. Thank you so much. Thank you,
everybody. Good night.
everybody.